The Carina Nebula never forgave intruders. Its radioactive storms shredded shields, its magnetic fields scrambled sensors, and its dust clouds swallowed ships whole. That's why First Scout Zareth of the Alliance vessel, Starward Seeker, knew something was wrong when her sensors picked up a perfectly geometric shape within the chaos. "Control, please verify readings in Sector 7. She chittered, her antennae twitching as she adjusted the gain. The massive silhouette shouldn't have been there. Nothing that size could survive the nebula's fury. Her sensor officer, a crystalline pexillary named Vex, hummed in confirmation. Mass reading suggests approximately 3 Earth miles in length. Material composition. The crystal being's facets flickered with disbelief. Impossible. Its reading is Terra-grade metamaterials. The bridge fell silent. Every species in the Constellation Alliance knew about Terra-grade metamaterials, the nearly indestructible nanolatticed metal that had made human warships virtually invulnerable during the Last Stand. The secret of its manufacture had died with Earth. Magnification 10, Zareth ordered, her claws clicking nervously against her command chair. The main viewport shifted, cutting through the nebula's crimson haze with enhancement algorithms. The shape resolved itself into a nightmare from history books. A massive battlecruiser hung in the void, its midnight black hull adorned with scars and impact craters that told stories of impossible survival. 3 miles of geometric perfection, bristling with weapon ports and sensor arrays that put modern ships to shame. But it was the name, still visible in faded gold lettering, that made Zareth's blood run cold. TBS Prometheus. By the first light, Vex whispered, their crystalline form vibrating with shock. That's a Terra Battlecruiser. The Terra Battlecruiser. The Prometheus wasn't just any human warship. It was the prototype, the first of its class, and the ship that had single-handedly held off the entire Carthulian Third Fleet at the Battle of Alpha Centauri. Its disappearance had spawned 2 centuries of conspiracy theories and salvage hunts. Control, requesting immediate, Zareth began, but klaxons cut her off. Energy spike, her tactical officer shouted. The ship, it's powering up. Impossible, Zareth thought. No ship could maintain power for 200 years. But the evidence was undeniable as running lights flickered to life along the Prometheus's hull. Point defense turrets swiveled with terrible precision, tracking the Starward Seeker's position. Multiple systems activating. Vex reported, their crystalline form now pulsing with worried amber light. Detecting quantum core initialization, shield grid charging, and something else. Energy signature doesn't match any known technology. The nebula itself seemed to dim as the Prometheus came alive, its ancient systems awakening with terrifying efficiency. A soft blue glow emanated from its drive section, and for a moment, Zareth could have sworn she saw space itself bend around the human vessel. Send emergency broadcast, she ordered. All frequencies, all languages. Make sure. The Prometheus's response came without warning. A pulse of energy rippled out from the ship, washing over the Starward Seeker like a wave. Every system on Zareth's ship went dark, then rebooted with text scrolling across each screen. PRO2 Sozoa Lazarus INITA Tim Pure Ailed Cur DNAT is VERFIED. Ava way Kening CQNC commencing. Do not 8P0. Ashe. Get me Alliance Command, Zareth whispered, watching as the legendary ship's engines began to glow brighter. Tell them history just woke up. The Prometheus turned with impossible grace for its size, its movement sending ripples through the nebulous cosmic storms. As Zareth watched, she realized this wasn't just a discovery. This was an omen. The greatest warship humanity had ever built hadn't been destroyed. It had been waiting. The Alliance Council chamber erupted into chaos as 7 holographic displays showed the same footage. The Prometheus, moving under its own power, cutting through the Carina Nebula like a knife through silk. The massive chamber, designed to hold representatives of 32 spacefaring species, could barely contain the overlapping voices of outrage and fear. The human weapon must be destroyed immediately. High Commander Vexthal of the Pexillary Collective thundered, his crystalline form pulsing angry red. My people lost 3 colony worlds to that ship's solar lance. Ambassador James Carter watched silently from the human delegation's modest platform, his weathered face betraying no emotion. At 63, he was one of the few humans who remembered his grandfather's stories about serving on Terra-class battlecruisers, about the raw power they wielded and the terrible responsibility that came with it. The Prometheus belongs to no one. First Speaker Ixie of the Meridian Confluence chittered, her insectoid mandibles clicking rapidly. By Alliance salvage law. Salvage law. Carter's voice cut through the chamber like steel. He stood, and despite humanity's diminished status in the galaxy, the room fell silent. That ship isn't salvage, it's active, it's crewed, and it's heading somewhere with purpose. The main display shifted, showing the Prometheus's current trajectory. The massive warship had already passed 3 Alliance checkpoints, its ancient ECM systems still sophisticated enough to prevent any meaningful scan penetration. New Phoenix, Carter continued, pointing to the human colony marked in the ship's path. That's where it's going. The first and largest human settlement established after the fall of Earth. The ship is going home. Home to what? Demanded Ambassador Curl of the Zenthri Dominion, his scaled face contorting. To the weapons that made your kind so feared. To the technologies that. A deafening alarm cut through the chamber. The main display flickered, showing new sensor data from the Prometheus. The ship's quantum core was cycling up, its power signature growing exponentially. By the void, someone whispered. It's activating its solar forge. Carter felt his heart race. The solar forge, humanity's greatest achievement and most terrible weapon. A system capable of transmuting stellar matter into raw materials, or turning stars into bombs. We're detecting quantum entanglement signatures, the Alliance's chief scientist reported, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. The ship's AI is accessing networks across settled space. It's downloading historical records. Carter stepped forward. Let me approach the ship, he said firmly. I know its systems. My grandfather. Your grandfather helped create weapons that devastated worlds. Vexthal interrupted. The Pexillary will never. The chamber plunged into darkness. Every screen, every hologram, every light source suddenly died. When they flickered back to life 3 seconds later, a new message burned across every display. ATN to Lion, Alliance Council. Therotocito Alizarius requires XCCS to historical rectiorities. Resistance will be noted. Commander Williams sends REGARDs. Carter felt the blood drain from his face. Williams, he whispered. Jackson Tombstone Williams. The name sent fresh murmurs through the chamber. Even aliens who hated humanity knew that name. The commander who had never lost a battle, whose tactical genius had kept humanity fighting long after Earth's fall. The man who had disappeared with the Prometheus 2 centuries ago. The ship's changing course, the sensor officer announced. It's accelerating. Breaking formation. Alliance vessels are moving to intercept. Carter watched as the Prometheus's engines flared brilliant blue, its massive form elegant despite its size. The pursuing Alliance ships looked like minnows chasing a leviathan. Don't, he warned, but it was too late. The Alliance vessels opened fire. The Prometheus's response was immediate and precise. No weapons fired, no shields flared. Instead, space itself seemed to twist around the massive ship, and in a flash of quantum distortion, it vanished, taking with it 2 centuries of questions and leaving behind a galaxy full of new ones. In the ensuing silence, Carter touched the old holopatch he always carried, showing his grandfather in a Terra Fleet uniform. "What were you protecting?" he whispered. "What was worth waiting 200 years for?" The answers, he suspected, would shake the galaxy to its core. Zero gravity made the blood globules fascinating. They hung in perfect spheres throughout the corridor, preserved by quantum-locked stasis fields that had maintained this moment in time for 2 centuries. Ambassador Carter floated past them, his suit's lights revealing more of the Prometheus's final battle. "Incredible," Dr. Vex hummed, their crystalline form refracting light across the frozen scene. The stasis field's quantum coherence is still at 99.97%. These events might as well have happened yesterday. Carter studied a nearby crewman, frozen mid-stride with a plasma rifle raised. The name patch read Rodriguez. The determined expression on the young man's face made Carter's chest tight. "Look at their positioning," Security Chief Control noted, his reptilian eyes scanning the corridor. They weren't retreating. They were protecting something. The Joint Alliance human expedition had finally gained access to the Prometheus after its unexpected reappearance in high orbit around New Phoenix. The ship's AI had allowed them entry, but remained cryptically silent about its purpose. "Ambassador," called Dr. Ixie from further ahead, her mandibles clicking excitedly. "We found an active holographic buffer." The team converged on a junction where a small drone projected flickering images. A crew member in a command uniform appeared, her face streaked with sweat and blood. "Engineering to bridge. We've got borders in sectors 7 through 12. Lopes and Chen are holding them at the quantum core, but..." Weapons fire interrupted her. "Commander Williams, sir, we can't maintain." The hologram shifted. Now it showed the bridge, where a tall man with steel-gray hair stood examining tactical displays. Commander Jackson Williams, the legendary Tombstone. "Execute Protocol Lazarus," Williams ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Quantum core to full power. Begin temporal stasis procedure." "Sir," a young officer protested, "that's never been tested at full ship scale. We cooled." "Lieutenant," Williams cut in, "Earth is gone. Our colonies are falling. This ship carries everything we can't lose. Our history, our achievements, our future. We are going to preserve it all until the exact moment it's needed most." He smiled grimly. "That's an order." The hologram faded. Carter touched the wall, feeling the thrum of power beneath the ancient metal. "The ship's eye," he said. "It's been active this whole time, waiting for specific coordinates in spacetime." "Impossible," Vex vibrated skeptically. "No eye could maintain coherence for temporal WAYPOINT AP Roaching," the ship's AI suddenly announced, its voice echoing through the corridors. "Awakening CQENC preparatory stage INITIAKE. Proceed to Coorivalt." The frozen scenes flickered as stasis fields began to power down sequentially, creating a path deeper into the ship. The team followed, passing more scenes of desperate battle. Carter noticed something strange about the frozen attackers. "These aren't Carthulian borders," Kirkle said, examining a crystalline form similar to Vex's but darker, more ancient. "This technology, it's older than any known species." They reached a massive vault door marked with warnings in 12 languages. Above it, written in English, "The cost of tomorrow is paid in today's blood." "Ambassador Carter," the AI addressed him directly. "GENETIT markiers, QOMNFRM CURULINEAG. Voice authorization required." Carter swallowed hard. His grandfather had been the Prometheus's weapons officer, had fought, and possibly died here. What words would they have chosen? "The stars are not our limit," he said clearly, reciting the Terra Fleet motto. The vault door slid open with a hiss of preserved atmosphere. Inside, 3 stasis pods hummed with power. Through their frosted surfaces, Carter could make out human forms. "Life signs stable," Dr. Ixie reported, her scientific excitement overriding her usual caution. "They're alive. After 2 centuries, There actually. The pod in the center began to open. Steam billowed out as ancient mechanisms worked perfectly. A hand gripped the edge, and Commander Jackson Williams pulled himself up, his eyes sharp and alert, as if he'd merely taken a nap. "Right on schedule," he said, checking a device on his wrist. "We have 3 weeks until they arrive." He looked at the stunned team. "I hope the galaxy is ready for what's coming. Because last time, we weren't." The legend of Terra Fleet had awakened, and with him, Carter sensed, would come answers that might shake the foundations of everything the Alliance thought they knew about humanity's last war. Medical Bay 1 hummed with activity as doctors from 3 species monitored the revival process. Commander Williams sat on the edge of a diagnostic bed, his Terra Fleet uniform still pristine after 2 centuries in quantum stasis. His executive officer, Sarah Reynolds, and chief engineer Marcus Chen recovered nearby, both looking remarkably composed for people who had just skipped 200 years. "Neurological patterns normal," announced Dr. Ixie, her mandibles twitching with barely contained excitement. "No signs of temporal degradation or cognitive displacement." "Of course not," Williams said, checking his ancient chronometer. The math was perfect. Had to be. He stood, moving with the practiced ease of someone who hadn't spent 2 centuries frozen. "Now about those defensive platforms I saw in orbit around New Phoenix." "Commander," Ambassador Carter interrupted, "with respect, you can't simply." "Resume command." Williams smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ambassador, I never relinquished it." "Computer, command authorization Williams 009 Lazarus." "Command DCODES HCKINOWLEGGD." The ship's eye responded. "Well, Sue and me back, Commandeer. Temporal coordinates VER. HIED. 21 days. Then TL Puro GCTEDEME or GNC." The medical bay fell silent. Carter felt a chill run down his spine. Emergence of what? Williams shared a look with Reynolds and Chen. "The real reason the Carthulians attacked Earth," he said quietly. "The threat that they were running from." Reynolds pulled up a holographic display, showing strange gravitational readings from the galaxy's edge. "We discovered it by accident. Our experimental FTL drives weren't just breaking the light barrier. They were creating ripples in space-time, ripples that woke something up." "The Carthulians knew," Chen added, his hands moving through diagnostic routines on a tablet with practiced ease. "They'd seen it before, 1,000 years ago. Tried to warn us, but we thought they were threatening us. By the time we understood," he trailed off. "By then Earth was gone." Williams finished. "But we had a plan. The Prometheus wasn't just a warship. It was humanity's ark, carrying everything we couldn't lose. And more importantly, carrying the one weapon that might work against them." "Against what?" Carter demanded. Williams waved his hand, and the medical bay's displays changed to show something that made the alien doctors step back in horror. A massive structure of impossible geometry, spreading between stars like a web of darkness. "We call them void heralds," Williams said. "Silicon-based entities that hibernate between galaxies. They feed on organic life, use it to fuel their expansion. The Carthulians had fought them before, pushed them back with massive losses. But our FTL experiments, we accidentally rang the dinner bell." "The Solar Forge," Carter whispered, understanding dawning. "It wasn't just for manufacturing. It was a prototype," Chen confirmed. "A way to turn their own feeding process against them. But we needed time. Time to perfect it, and time for the right moment. The Herald's crystalline structure is nearly invulnerable, except during their awakening cycle." Reynolds pulled up more data. "We calculated it would take exactly 200 years for them to complete their hibernation cycle after the last war. So we waited. In 3 weeks, they'll begin to wake up. And this time, we'll be ready." "That's why the ship came back now," Carter realized. "You weren't hiding. You were timing an ambush across centuries." Williams nodded, but his expression remained grim. The Prometheus holds the key to fighting them, but we'll need the Alliance. All of it. No more species rivalries, no more political games. Either we stand together, or we feed the void together. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. On every screen, gravitational sensors showed massive distortions at the edge of Alliance space. "They're early," Williams said, already moving toward the door. "Reynolds, get to the bridge. Chen, start warming up the forge. Ambassador." He paused, looking at Carter with intense eyes. "Your grandfather stood with me when we first found out what was coming. Will you do the same?" Carter straightened his spine, feeling the weight of history and future pressing down equally. "The stars are not our limit, Commander." "No," Williams agreed as they hurried toward the bridge. "But they might be our salvation." Behind them, the Prometheus's quantum core began to pulse with power, preparing for a battle 2 centuries in the making. The Prometheus's bridge hummed with restored power, holographic displays casting ethereal light across the ancient command center. Commander Williams stood at the tactical station, his hands dancing across controls that had waited 2 centuries for his return. "Solder forge at 60% capacity," Chen reported from engineering. "But sir, the quantum core is showing micro-fluctuations. The long stasis affected it more than we calculated." Williams nodded, studying the simulation of the forge's energy pattern. Behind him, Ambassador Carter watched in awe as the legendary ship came fully alive. Alliance observers stood at backup stations, their various species united in stunned silence as they witnessed human engineering 2 centuries ahead of their time. "Show them," Williams ordered softly. Reynolds initiated a holographic sequence in the center of the bridge. A massive 3-dimensional map materialized, showing not just their galaxy, but the dark space between galaxies. Red markers pulsed in the void. "These are Void Herald hibernation nodes," Williams explained. "Massive organic silicon hybrid structures. They seed themselves in the darkness between star clusters, waiting for suitable prey galaxies to evolve sufficient biomass." "But our FTL experiments," Carter said, understanding dawning. "The ripples in spacetime." "Exactly." Williams expanded the display, showing energy waves radiating from Earth's location 2 centuries ago. "Our drives created quantum disturbances that propagated through subspace, like throwing rocks into a cosmic pond." The heralds felt the ripples. The simulation continued, showing dark tendrils reaching toward the galaxy. The Carthulian fleet appeared, moving to intercept. "They tried to stop us," Reynolds added, her voice tight with old pain. "Not out of malice, but desperation. They'd fought the heralds before, pushed them back at devastating cost. When they detected our FTL tests, they knew we'd doomed everyone." But the solder forge, an Alliance observer interrupted. "It was supposed to be for manufacturing materials." Williams laughed darkly. "That was the cover story. The forge taps into stellar matter at the quantum level, yes, but its true purpose." He pressed a sequence of commands. The main viewport shifted, showing the Prometheus's bow. A massive aperture was opening, revealing crystalline structures that pulsed with contained stellar fire. "The heralds feed by breaking down organic matter at the quantum level," Chen explained from engineering. "The forge reverses that process. It can transform their silicon-based forms into organic matter, make them vulnerable. At a cost," Williams added grimly. "The power requirements are enormous. Each shot," he paused, looking at his crew. "Each shot burns out part of the quantum core. We'll get 3, maybe 4 attempts before the ship tears itself apart." Alarms suddenly blared. The tactical display lit up with new contacts at the galaxy's edge. Massive structures were emerging from subspace, their crystalline forms defying Euclidean geometry. "They're early," Reynolds whispered. "The hibernation calculations were off." Williams straightened, his expression hardening into the mask that had earned him the name Tombstone. "Because they never fully hibernated. The Carthulians didn't drive them all back. Some stayed hidden, watching." waiting, learning. Carter finished, horror dawning. They've been studying us for 2 centuries. Which means, Williams said, moving to the command chair, we've lost our element of surprise. Chen, divert all power to the forge. Reynolds, plot an intercept course. Ambassador, he turned to Carter, get me a channel to every Alliance world. They need to know what's coming. The Prometheus's engines flared to life, its massive form turning toward the emerging threat. Throughout the ship, 200 years of waiting transformed into desperate preparation. Sir, Reynolds called out, her voice tight. First Herald structure emerging now. It's bigger than anything in our records. The main screen showed it, a vast lattice of crystalline darkness, unfolding into real space like a blooming flower of extinction. In its center, something pulsed with terrible intelligence. They remember us, Williams said softly. They remember what we almost did to them. His hands gripped the command chair. This time, let's make sure the lesson sticks. The Prometheus moved forward, carrying humanity's last, best hope toward a nightmare 2 centuries in the making. Behind them, Alliance ships began to gather, drawn by the return of a legend and the arrival of a truth too terrible to face alone. The Alliance Emergency Council convened in the Prometheus's tactical center, holographic representatives of 32 species crowding the space as Williams revealed humanity's darkest discovery. Behind him, sensor displays tracked the approaching Void Herald structures, their crystalline forms now visible to normal space sensors. 8 vessels, each approximately the size of Earth's moon. Reynolds reported, her voice steady despite the impossible numbers scrolling across her screen. Their outer shells are reorganizing, adapting to our sensor scans in real time. Show them the Carthulian records, Williams ordered. The tactical display shifted, showing ancient battles. Massive crystalline ships tearing through organic matter, converting entire worlds into silicon-based structures. Entire species reduced to raw materials for the Herald's endless expansion. This footage is over 1,000 years old, Williams explained. The Carthulians fought them to a standstill, but at a terrible cost. Of their 1,000 worlds, only 40 survived. They became warriors not by choice, but necessity. And when they saw our experiments, Carter added, understanding flooding his features, they recognized the same patterns, the same risks. We thought they were being aggressive. Chen called from his engineering station, where he wrestled with the solar forge's increasingly unstable power grid. In reality, they were trying to save us from ourselves, from what we were about to wake up. The council erupted in overlapping voices, fear and anger mixing in a dozen languages. Williams let them vent for exactly 10 seconds before raising his hand. We don't have time for debate, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Heralds are adapting faster than we predicted. They've had 2 centuries to study our galaxy, to learn our weaknesses. Our only advantage is the solar forge, and even that's failing. As if to emphasize his point, the ship shuddered. Emergency lights flashed in engineering. Quantum core destabilizing. Chen shouted, the forge is drawing too much power. We need tow. The tactical display suddenly blazed with new contacts. The Herald ships were launching something. Smaller crystalline structures, each the size of a standard Alliance cruiser. Harvesters, Reynolds identified, her face pale. They're not waiting for their main ships. They're starting the conversion process now. The Council watched in horror as the smaller vessels accelerated toward populated systems. Screens lit up with distress calls as outer colonies detected the approach. We can't stop them all, Williams said quietly. Not even with the forge. We need a new strategy. He turned to the Council. We need your ships, your technology, everything you have. You expect us to trust you. The Pexillary representative demanded, when your actions brought this doom upon us. No, Williams replied, his voice hard. I expect you to survive. He activated a new simulation, showing the solar forge's energy pattern combined with various Alliance technologies. Your shield harmonics, combined with Zen3 phase technology and our targeting systems, meridian power distribution coupled with pixelary crystal matrices. We fight together, or we die alone. Another alarm blared. The nearest Herald vessel was altering its course, heading directly for the Prometheus. They recognized the ship, Reynolds realized. They remember what we almost did to them last time. Williams smiled grimly. Good. Then they know we're dangerous. He turned to the council. I need an answer. Now. The Prometheus can't win this fight alone, but together, we might have a chance. What's it going to be? The council chamber fell silent. Then, one by one, representatives began signaling agreement. Ships moved to join formation with the Prometheus. Ancient enemies united by a greater threat. Engineering to bridge, Chen called, his voice strained. I stabilized the core, but we got maybe 3 shots with the forge before it goes critical. Make them count, Williams ordered. He looked at the assembled fleet, at species that had been enemies now preparing to fight together. Battle stations, all ships, form up on the Prometheus. Let's show these silicon nightmares what organic life can do when it stands together. The combined fleet moved forward as one, humanity's greatest warship leading aliens who had once feared it toward a battle that would determine the fate of all organic life in the galaxy. The Void Heralds approached, their crystalline forms casting shadows across the stars themselves. The real war was about to begin. Harvester squadrons, bearing 030. Reynolds called out as crystalline vessels streaked past the Prometheus's bow. They're targeting the Meridian defense platforms. The battle for New Phoenix had been raging for 6 hours. The combined Alliance fleet fought with desperate coordination, their technologies merging in ways never before attempted. At the heart of it all, the Prometheus directed the defense, its ancient systems proving more than a match for the cosmic horror they faced. Zen3 cruisers, execute pattern Delta, Williams commanded. Pixelary ships, prepare to channel their shield discharge through your crystal matrices. Chen, status on the forge. First shot ready, Chen reported, his voice strained. But sir, the quantum core is showing microfractures. We'll get 3 shots, maximum. Williams studied the tactical display. 8 massive Herald ships approached in a formation that seemed to bend space itself, their crystalline structures reflecting starlight in impossible ways. Around them, smaller harvesters engaged the Alliance fleet in a deadly dance. Look at their pattern, Carter said suddenly, pointing to the display. The harvesters, they're not just attacking. They're feeding data back to the main ships, learning our tactics in real time. Then let's teach them something new. Williams smiled. All ships, execute Protocol Lazarus 1. The Alliance fleet scattered in what appeared to be chaos. The Herald's formation shifted, adapting to pursue the seemingly panicked retreat. Then the trap sprung. Zen3 ships phased into existence behind the harvesters, their modified weapons combining with pixelary crystal energy in ways that shattered the smaller crystalline vessels. Meridian carriers launched swarms of fighters enhanced with human targeting systems, overwhelming Herald defenses with precision strikes. Main Herald vessel in range, Reynolds announced. We have a shot. All ships, clear the targeting lane, Williams ordered. Chen, give us everything the forge has. The Prometheus's bow opened like a blooming flower of death. Solar energy, channeled through impossibly advanced quantum mechanics, lashed out at the nearest Herald ship. The beam struck crystalline surfaces and did nothing. Direct hit, Chen reported frantically. But their structure is different. The quantum resonance isn't matching our calculations. They adapted, Carter whispered. 200 years of studying our technology, our tactics. Williams's expression hardened. Chen, divert all power to sensors. Reynolds, get me a full spectrum analysis of their outer shell. Carter. He turned to the ambassador. What's the one thing machines can never truly understand about organic life? Carter watched as another Herald ship absorbed a combined attack from 3 Alliance cruisers without damage. We evolve. We adapt. His eyes widened. We improvise. Exactly. Williams opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, dump your shield harmonics data to the Prometheus. Chen, feed those patterns into the Forge's targeting matrix. Reynolds, plot us a collision course with the lead herald. Sir. Reynolds's hands hesitated over the controls. The core won't survive that kind of power surge. It doesn't have to. Williams stood, his expression reminiscent of the legends told about him. It just has to survive long enough. All hands, braced for combat maneuvers. The Prometheus surged forward, its ancient engines pushing it to speeds that threatened to tear it apart. Alliance ships fell into formation behind it, adding their shield energy to its advance. Herald vessels adjusting formation, Reynolds reported. They're trying to predict our attack vector. Let them try, Williams said softly. Chen, reconfigure the Forge. Don't target their ships directly. Target the space between them. Carter, show us what your grandfather's weapons can really do. Carter's hands flew across the tactical console, combining targeting solutions in ways that should have been impossible. Ready. All ships, Williams commanded. Fire everything you have. Now. The combined fleet released a storm of energy at the space between the Herald vessels. The Prometheus's solar forge fired its second shot, not at the crystalline ships, but at the fabric of space-time itself. The result was beyond anything in the tactical simulations. Space twisted, warped, and for a moment, organic and crystalline technology merged in a dance of pure destruction. The battle for survival had entered its final phase, and the galaxy would never be the same. Core breach imminent. Chen's voice cut through the chaos on the Prometheus's bridge. The quantum containment field is failing. The massive battlecruiser shuddered as it pushed deeper into the heart of the Herald fleet. Behind it, the combined Alliance forces pressed their advantage, using the tactics learned from their first successful strike. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. Hull integrity at 28%, Reynolds reported, her station sparking from overloaded circuits. We won't survive another direct engagement. Williams stood at the tactical display, watching as the remaining Herald vessels regrouped. Their crystalline surfaces had been scared by the unprecedented combination of technologies, but they were adapting, evolving their defenses in real time. They're opening a spatial tunnel, Carter announced, his hands flying across the sensor controls. Energy signature suggests, by the stars. He looked up, face pale. They're calling reinforcements, a whole other hibernation cluster. How long? Williams demanded. 10 minutes until the tunnel stabilizes. After that, Carter let the implications hang in the air. Williams nodded, his expression settling into the calm certainty that had earned him his nickname 2 centuries ago. Chen, divert all remaining power to the Forge. Reynolds, plot us a course straight for that tunnel aperture. Carter, send our tactical databases to the Alliance fleet. Understanding dawned on their faces. Chen's voice came through the comm, quiet but determined. The core won't hold, sir. This will be our last shot. Make it count. Williams opened a channel to the fleet. All Alliance vessels, this is Commander Williams. You've witnessed today what we can accomplish together. The Prometheus carries the sum of human military knowledge, and we've just transmitted it all to you. Study it. Build upon it. Most importantly, remember what we achieved when we set aside our fears and fought as one. The Herald Tunnel began to take shape, a massive tear in space-time that promised extinction on an unimaginable scale. The Prometheus turned to face it, its ancient engines flaring one last time. Sir, Reynolds said softly, it's been an honor. The honor was watching species who once feared this ship learn to trust it. Williams replied. Chen, status on the Forge. Ready for final shot, Commander. The core. It's going critical. We'll only get a few seconds after we fire. Williams smiled. A few seconds is all we need. He turned to Carter. Your grandfather would be proud. The Prometheus fulfilled its mission, not just preserving humanity's legacy, but teaching others to build upon it. Carter straightened in his chair. The stars are not our limit. No, Williams agreed. We are not limited by stars, or fear, or even time itself. All ships, clear the blast radius. Ambassador, send the final command sequence. The Prometheus accelerated toward the spatial tunnel, its hull gleaming one last time, in the light of 1,000 weapons firing in concert. The Herald vessels moved to intercept, but they had learned the wrong lesson. They expected another attack on their crystalline forms. All power to the forge, Williams commanded. Target the tunnel's quantum framework. The solar forge fired its final shot, not at the heralds, but at the fabric of reality they were trying to tear open. The beam struck the tunnel's edge, and for a moment, space itself seemed to scream. Core breach in 5 seconds, Chen shouted. Williams sat in his command chair, watching the tunnel begin to collapse. It's been an honor serving with all of you, both centuries ago and today. The Prometheus's quantum core detonated as the ship reached the tunnel's threshold. The explosion, combined with the forge's final shot, created a cascade effect that collapsed the spatial tear in upon itself, taking the ancient battlecruiser and the nearest herald vessels with it. From the Alliance fleet's perspective, it looked like a new star being born, then immediately collapsing into a quantum singularity that sealed the tunnel permanently. 1 year later, the first Phoenix-class cruiser launched from a joint Alliance human shipyard. Its hull contained fragments of the Prometheus, and its crew included members of every species that had fought in the Battle of New Phoenix. On its bow, written in 32 languages, was a simple phrase: "The stars are not our limit. We are our only limit." The legend of the Prometheus was over, but its legacy was just beginning.